Lately here on CBC Winnipeg News at 6, we've been taking a look at homelessness and how we might do a better job of housing people, looking for ideas. Today we turn our sights to Houston, Texas, because that city reduced homelessness by 63% since 2012. In fact, at the provincial legislature, the NDP says if it were in power, it would use the same model here, a model called the Way Home. Anna Rauch is with Houston's Coalition for the Homeless, the lead agency in the program, and she spoke last week with our Riley Laychuk.
But what is the Way Home and how does it help people get off the street and into homes of their own?
It's faith-based organizations, secular organizations, liberals, conservatives, public-private partnerships, other stakeholders like the VA, local mental health authority, the city and county housing authorities, et cetera. And we, since 2012, we've decreased homelessness by 63%.
What makes this distinct, I guess, from other programs to end homelessness that have been tried and tested before?
I really think that our success is, it comes back to a shared vision of permanent housing and supportive services as the answer to end homelessness. We use the Housing First model. We prioritize the most vulnerable individuals for housing first. We have different assessment processes that we follow, but really we just believe that the only way to end homelessness is through permanent housing with supportive services. And we focus all of our attention on that. When we, realigned how we were going to look at our strategies around homelessness in 2012 when we created the Way Home, we just made that our focus. Housing first, permanent housing, supportive services to end homelessness. I'd say that over 90% of our resources, funding-wise, goes into permanent housing and not shelter and temporary solutions, because we know that at the end, first of all, those are more expensive. And at the end of the day, you still have to find housing for all of those individuals that are in temporary situations. So I think our success has been around this collaborative model that Housing First works.
So having said all of that, how do you react when you hear that other cities, even cities in other countries like ours here in Canada, are looking at this as sort of the blueprint model to reduce homelessness?
You just have to start a conversation. Because I've been to several communities, especially in the last few months, doing presentations and just having conversations, and it seems like where the break happens is when there's no collaboration and no communication. So you also have to be very data driven. That's something that we pride ourselves on, and by that I mean look at your data, look at what the data is showing you as far as what people need in order to address homelessness. And so what we did before we were data driven. The city and the county were putting out funding proposals with no rhyme or reason behind them. And so a partner could apply for something and they would be funded, but that may or may not have been what the city or the county needed to really make an impact on homelessness. And so when you start looking at the data and you start conducting, we had a needs analysis where we met with individuals experiencing homelessness or that had been housed to talk about like what are their needs, what are the gaps that we weren't able to fill, and so making decisions around that. So now we participate in the city and the county's action plan. So every year when they're doing their planning for the year, they consult the coalition and we provide narrative and data towards those plans. And so instead of the city or the county just putting out funding proposals with no rhyme or reason now, they contact us and they say, hey, can we look at the data? Let's see what we need to really end homelessness. And more than likely, it's going to be permanent housing instead of shelter, instead of temporary solutions.
One final question for you. When you look at all of this as a whole, bringing down the homeless rate, bringing up the number of affordable housing units, what effect has that had on the city and the people in the city overall?
It's less money on taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer, and there's been a lot of studies done where it shows that for someone to live on the streets, they're probably going to get arrested multiple times for trespassing because they're sleeping on a right of way or a sidewalk or a park or wherever that may be. People that are living unsheltered, they don't have access to adequate health care, so they might be calling 911 and using emergency rooms for regular health care. All of those things are funded by taxpayers. So when you look at the cost of that for one person in 1 year, that could be easily close to $60,000. As opposed to housing someone for 1 year in permanent housing is around $17,000. So factor in that times however many homeless people you have. So if you have, it's hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayers money that's going into, not even making a dent in the problem versus way less money to house the individual. And then, not only will it help the individual being housed, but it helps the community because people are happy not to have to pay high taxes to address the issue. People are happy not having to drive around the city and seeing encampments and people living in tents. And so it's just all around, it's a win-win for everyone.
Well, Anna, I want to thank you for your time and thank you for sharing a bit of insight with me today.
No problem. Take care.